This video is for one of our most colourful projects to date, and that is Bow the Dragon. So we'll take you through all the techniques, including the important choice of whether you're going to work visible rows or invisible rows as you make your dragon. Also, all the stitches you need to add on the details and some good sewing up tips too. So I'm going to run through all the stitches, techniques, talk through the structure and give you some good sewing up tips for making your Bow the Dragon. So this is brand new design celebrating Chinese New Year 2021, and this is made in our orange, teal and yellow. The one behind me here is done in our yellow, orange and ruby. It's a really fun pattern. I know you're going to have a lot of fun making it in different colours. I can't wait to see the choices that you make. So with this design, first thing to explain really is the fact that the curve of this dragon, you are crocheting that in. So it's not a trick of sewing up or anything that you do in terms of crocheting pieces. You are actually making it in one long piece like this. So what you're doing is you're putting increasing in this bit to make it curve that way. Then your increasing goes into the top to make it curve back down that way. And then again on the bottom as we approach the neck that you sew your head onto. And the choice that you've got, which is detailed in your pattern, is introducing a different technique that I've not done before. So this one here, this pink one, this one's made using rows where you'd be crocheting backwards and forwards as you normally would be when you're making a row. So you'll be doing rounds here because obviously you're making it in a circle as per the usual technique. When you move to rows, you'll be going backwards and forwards. And I am going to show you that close up in a second. But with this orange one here, do you see that it's much more invisible? You can't see those rows in the same way. And that's because I've used an invisible row technique that I'm going to show you. It's entirely up to you in terms of which one you use. It makes no difference to the shape. So your shape will be exactly the same. It's just making a decision about whether you like this texture created by the visible rows, so working rows in a normal way, or whether you want to try the invisible row technique, which will just give you a slightly neater finish on the shape of that dragon. So let me explain what I mean. I'm just going to swap to this lime one here so you can see it. So this one's done with the invisible technique. So you see you can't see the rows in quite the same way as I go along. So what you're going to do the invisible row technique. So I'll do a visible row first and then I'll do an invisible row so you can see the difference between the two. So to do the visible row, what you're going to be doing is crocheting along your round as normal, as per your pattern instruction. I'm going to do 15 this time. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and then your instruction will say to turn. So if you're going to do the normal visible row technique, all you need to do is turn your work so you're back the other way, so the wrong side is facing you, and then crochet those 15 stitches back, or as your pattern states on where you are in the pattern. So put your hook into that first stitch, the one that you've just worked, so you're turning right on yourself. You're not going to use a chain to turn, you're just going to turn right back on yourself, and because we want to obviously create as fewer holes as possible in our fabric, so no need for a chain when you turn, just turn right back onto yourself, and then you're going to work all the way back across those stitches like that. And I'm not going to go right the way again, follow your pattern, I'm just showing you the techniques here. What you will then do is it will tell you to turn again, so you go back, you'll then be turning, say in your last one, turning again, and then you're going to go across those stitches, so back in the normal direction of your rounds. Again, make sure you turn into your first stitch, so when you do turn you need to go back into that immediate one there. So go across these like this. So this is you working into the wrong side effectively of the stitches because you work those other ones going in the opposite direction. And the technique I'm showing you here is the one that will create the visible rows, so you will see that ridged texture on your dragon as it changes its shape. When you get to the end of here, so when you've worked over those stitches, obviously they're sitting at a higher level to the others, because that's what's creating the shape, is you've come upwards and created a ridge. What you need to do here when you reach the end of them is you just need to make sure you continue crocheting into that round. Now I just want to pause for a second to show you where to do that. Be careful that you're not going to be adding a stitch by going into that one. Do you see how that stitch is attached to that one there? Instead, you need to come right down into this one here. Keep it nice and tight when you do this first stitch coming off that high one, because that'll just make sure that you minimize any hole in the surface of your fabric. And then that's you back onto that round, right the way round to the end, as it is normally. So you see what it does is you've basically created a little bit of extra height in these stitches by doing that incomplete round, turning back on yourself, and then you finish that off again, and that's what will create that curve in your dragon as it goes round. So that's how you would do it visibly. Now I'm just going to show you this new technique to do it invisibly. If you fancy something new, trying a totally new technique, I will show you how to do the invisible stitch. So what I've done here is I've pulled it back to where I've got 15 across in my normal direction, so they were all in my right side. What I'm going to do then is I'm going to turn my work as I did before, but rather than working from front to back, which will give you those visible rows, what we're actually going to do is we're going to work from the back to the front. So that means that we'll still be working into the front of our fabric, into the right side of our fabric. So to work back to front effectively, what you need to do is take your hook. Again, you need to be going into this first stitch here because you're turning right back on yourself. So yarn over and take that with you over there. Then you're going to twist this stitch clockwise, so you bring it round on itself like that, and then finish that stitch off as normal. So I'm just going to go across so that you can see that a few times. So from the back to the front of the fabric, coming through the stitch like that, yarn over and through, then twist this stitch clockwise. As a left-handed person, twist it anti-clockwise because you're going to be going the other way, and finish that stitch off. So back to front, yarn over, twist that stitch round at that stage, and then finish that off. And you'll work your stitches back along the other way, and what you're effectively doing is you're still working into the right side of the fabric then, so you're going to get them invisible rather than getting ridges like this. Do you see, this is the visible rows work to do the increase. This is when it's invisible. So because you're working into the right sides in both directions, you won't get those ridges in the same way. So I hope that helps show you that invisible technique. It is slightly slower, but it is worth it in terms of the neatness if you're not as keen on the texture created by the backwards and forwards rows. So you've made your long piece of your dragon, and then you come to the sewing up bit, which is where I'm just going to give you a few more tips to help you along your way. So when you made your dragon, you've got your head like this, and I'll just run through a nice basic to gather the stitches to finish that off. So when you've finished a round, pop your stuffing inside it. You don't need it to be too firm, you just need it to fill out that shape so that you can see the shape properly, and then run your needle through the stitches in order to gather those final rounds together like that. Then when you're finishing off an end, so when you're wanting to hide that piece within it, because you are sewing quite a few pieces together when you're doing this dragon, to finish off an end, just take that yarn through a piece, around a stitch and out the other side. And you can do that a couple of times, and that way you know it's never going to come apart. So that's your head like that. What I'm just going to show you is how to sew it onto the body, because that's what I want you to see really, to give you help as we go along. So you've got your head. This is your body that you've crocheted in one go. Make sure that your body is quite firmly stuffed. So that's going to be holding your head up. So don't hold back on the stuffing in this last bit of the neck, because you're going to want your dragon to sit upright like that. So rather than gather the stitches on the neck, I'd keep them quite open as we attach them onto the head. Take your head like that and position it at the end of the neck. And then what I'm going to do is over sew into the back of the head and into the back of this neck like this. And I'm going to be going around a couple of times until I feel like I've got enough stability between the head and the neck as well. So don't worry if first time round you feel like it's quite floppy. I will be returning to work through these stitches again. So go all the way across there. That's it. And then just turn over the other side, so you've got the underneath of the head now. Sew them through those stitches like that. There we go. Then have a look at how it's looking in terms of its position on that body, and usually you'll probably want to add a few more stitches onto the back of the head here, so it flattens down a little bit as you put those on. Just see how you've almost got a neckline. What you need to do then is do another round up on the back of the head into the neck there, and just strengthen between that head and that neck. There we go. And that will hold the head up nicely, because you're going to be adding quite a lot of detail onto that head, so it will get quite heavy. There we go. So sew up like that. Now the next piece that I want to show you sewing on is the underbelly. So you make this piece separately, which will be running, and you're working that in rows. So you're running the full length of that underbelly like that. You're working it in rows, and then you sew this piece on. But I just want to show you. So a nice little tip really is, I've got quite a short end on here, and so I'm going to use that short end to tack it into place, and then I'll actually return back with a longer piece of yarn to sew it into position. If you're quite new to sewing up 3D shapes like this, then I would suggest that you can use pins. A pin like this, which is a blocking pin, they can be very helpful to pin the piece into position down the length of the body before you then come back to it and sew it into place. So you can put a pin in like that, again, get that nice and evenly on the underbelly, put another pin in, and you can do the same, so you've got that held in position while you then sew it the full length. But I'm just going to show you how I would sew it neatly into position. So I'm going to use a back stitch so that I keep my magenta, which is my darker colour, within that piece rather than it going on to the pink stitches. So take that and pop that in like that, and then come down 2 stitches along the side of the length, pull that through. Sorry, that's just come off my needle there. Let me pop that back on. Then come 1 stitch up, so into this one here, and then back down, miss 2 stitches again. So you're just back stitching all the way down those end stitches, and what that does is it makes it lovely and neat. You can't see your sewing up stitches at all in there, and it'll tack it all the way down the edge. There's no way that that can ever come loose. It'll give you a lovely neat edge. So you'll just need to do that all the way down, but pinning it into position first will help if you're new to this kind of thing. Obviously it goes right the way to the end like that. Tack that into place, and then just do that back stitch all the way down the length to put that in. So other things that I want to show you in terms of sewing up. So this is Beau's nose here, which is just a flat little oval shape like that. So gather those stitches in the same way, and I'm going to put his nose into position so I can then show you his mustache, because I'll just be able to revise all the stitches with you then as well that you'll be using to create those shapes. So take his nose like that, pop his nose onto the front of his face, and just sew that either end would be what I advise. So just do a few stitches at that end of the nose, come across to the other end, and tack that into place on the other side. There we go. Like that. So when you're doing the rest of his face, just to give you an idea about what you're making, you are making eyelids like this, and then you're actually making a cream ball that becomes his eyeball. So you pop that inside, so you literally put a little bit of stuffing into your eyeball and you pop that inside the eyelid, secure that into place before you sew that on. So you'll be making those separately and then putting them into position. With the mustache then, I just want to recap the stitches that you'll need in order to do details like that, because this would apply to his mustache, also to his little horns across his eyebrows, to his beard that sits underneath. What you need to do would be to slip stitch into position and chain the number of stitches stated in your pattern. And then what you're going to do is you're actually going to work back down that chain. So I'm just going to recap all of these stitches so you've got them in one handy video if you are hitting the point where you're sewing up your dragon. So firstly, you'll be doing a slip stitch. So you go in the next V along to do a slip stitch, yarn over and bring that through that one and through that one. So you're going to do, that's a slip stitch. You go in through the V, yarn over and bring it through in one motion. So they're all slip stitches there. Then it might be a double crochet, which is the one that we've been doing throughout. So to do that double crochet, you go in, yarn over and work that stitch. And I will remind you, these are British crochet terms. So that's a double crochet there, which is a US single crochet. So that's the double. Then the British half treble, what you need to do for a half treble is yarn over first. So go round your hook first, so you've got a loop on your hook, then go in through the stitch you're working, yarn over to the point where you've got 3 loops on your hook, and then come through all 3 in one motion. So yarn over like that, that's your British half treble. And then the last stitch that you might need in this pattern, and you definitely will need at the bottom of your spikes, is the actual treble. So to do the treble, you go round your hook first, go in the next stitch along, yarn over to the point where you've got 3 loops on your hook, just the same as you've been doing with that half treble, but this time round, yarn over and bring off 2, yarn over and bring off another 2. So you're knocking them off in 2 goes. So just to recap that treble there, yarn over and then take the first 2 off, yarn over again and take the second 2 off. So that's how you're creating a lot of these details that go onto the dragon, is by using different heights of stitch worked into a chain. So that shows you that one. What I want to show you too though is how to do the spikes down the back of his body. So what you're doing in here is very similar to what we just did, but you're actually slip stitch traversing in between. So that's just moving across the surface of the fabric with a slip stitch. So I'll show you that as well. So I usually do this detail last, so I know I'm going to get it into the center. If you are new to this and you're feeling a little bit less confident, again, you can use pins to mark where you're going to be doing it. So if you want to identify where the line is that you're going to be working that to make sure you stay in a straight line, then you can always put pins in, work to the top of the pin and then remove it. And that way you'll gradually be adding it on rather than trying to do the straight line in one go. So to do the spikes like this, what you will do is chain a much shorter chain, like that, and then work back down in that chain in exactly the same way that I was just doing. So it'll be a combination of different heights of stitch. And then when you reach the bottom of that chain, so we're going to do a treble in there and into the bottom. What you're going to do is then slip stitch traverse along this fabric. So put the hook in 2 rows down from where you were, where you slip stitched in to begin with, and that fixes the spike into place. So your spike is then fixed. You'll be sewing that in at the end, and then we're going to slip stitch traverse 3 stitches in between. So take your hook and put that around, so like that, downwards, yarn over and through that one and that one. So into the next one like that, around, yarn over and through both, and then do the third one in the same way. So you've done 3 slip stitches and then you set off again on another chain, and that's how you put those lovely spikes all the way down the back. It saves you having to make them all individually and sew them on at the end. So the last thing to show you really is a little trick with the legs on this design that's slightly different to something I've done before, and this is to make them more solid so that your dragon will stand up on his legs when you've finished him. So when you're making the legs, they'll look like this. And this is quite a wide top to it. What you need to do first is you need to stuff the toes. So put a little bit of stuffing into the bottom of those toes. Let me just give you an idea of how to do that. It's hardly any that you'll need. You're just trying to pad out that shape a little bit more. So pop a bit of stuffing in, use the handle of your hook to work that right down into a toe like that. There we go, then on to the next one. Third one. You don't need to overstuff them. It really is just to give them a little bit more 3D shape than being flat. And I have sewn my ends in just to give you an idea. When you've finished, you will have ends. All I've done is do what I did before, is gather the last few stitches that you've got there and sew the ends into the foot to give it a nice, neat, tidy finish. So when you finish this leg, what I want to do is to get it to splay so it stands flat, because obviously at the moment we've got a leg like this and the toes come off the bottom of it. So all I'm going to do that is fold it in half like this. So fold it in half, and you see how when I sew this into position like that, so I'm going to sew down the back, that will make my foot stand forward. So this one is a little bit of a trick of a change of direction by sewing. So all I'm going to do is keep it pinched like that. So I've got it folded in half, and I'm just going to sew down the back of the leg. So you can make that very, very neat if you just take half a stitch from one side and half a stitch from the other side. It will become almost invisible. So go all the way down like that. Down the back of that foot. And then when you get to here, again, do the same, just one last one here, because that'll make sure that that foot splays forwards, ready for you to sew it into position. So when you crochet it like that, it hasn't got its back claw on. I'll just show you how you can attach a back claw on should you wish to do so, because that'll give you the 5th digit that sits at the back there. So obviously you've crocheted your 4 in. Once you finish that off, you might want to take this thread back up to the top again, so you've got it to sew onto the side of your dragon. So once you finish that, just take that thread right the way back up the inside of that toe and up the leg, and that way your thread will be at the top, ready for you to sew it into position again. There we go. But you see how your foot splays nicely forward with the 4 digits, and you've got your square leg like that. So in terms of working the back claw on, I'm going to do it in a different colour so you can see it. So actually what you'll be doing when you're doing it is you're going to be doing it in your main colour. So you'll do the first circle that I'm about to show you in your pink, and then you'll swap to your purple in this example so that you put your claw on. But I'm actually going to do you the circle in the purple so that you can see it nice and clearly on the back of this foot. There we go. So you'll yarn over like that. And then what you're going to do is you're just going to draw a little circle with slip stitches. So you go in the fabric like that and slip stitch in. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6. And what I've created is a little base upon which I can then crochet into. So it's going to give you 6 stitches as a root that's really firmly attached to that foot. There's no way you have to fiddle around trying to sew that on. It's really firmly attached. All you do then, once you've got those stitches, and they would normally be in your main colour, so in your pink, is you'll just go in with your hook beneath both sides of that V and actually double crochet into those stitches from then on. And that way your last little back claw, so your 5th digit, will just grow off the back of that foot like that. Let me just show you on this one. So you'll slip stitch that into position like that in your yellow, and then you'll be able to work that last little claw on the back there. So that just helps those feet stand even more squarely. So lots of new techniques in this dragon. I hope that this video has been really helpful to show you that. What you're doing then is you're just assembling it at the end. So you'll be putting on, that's his lips, for example. You've got his horns. They're all regular techniques from that one only. The only main ones I wanted to show you was obviously that invisible crochet, which is very unique to this design, to make them go backwards and forwards, and the few little tips about sewing on the legs, etc. I look forward to seeing your dragons.